Welcome to Hard Beautiful Journey, where we embrace vulnerability as our superpower and let courage light our path. I'm Tiff Carson, here to share heartfelt stories of healing, grief, and resilience. Each week, I'll talk with guests from experts to everyday heroes about their journeys through adversity. Together, we'll uncover the beauty that emerges from life's challenges and how each experience can spark profound growth. Join us on this courageous journey of connection and transformation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Hard Beautiful Journey. Today, we are diving into one of the very important pillars of my Healing Heart Journey framework, Honor Your Body. We'll be talking about the powerful connection between our physical body and emotional well-being. I'm joined by someone very, very special, my friend Holli, who I've known since high school. And she's now a somatic therapist in training and an experienced yoga instructor, helping people unlock the connection between trauma and the body. Together, we'll explore how honoring our bodies can lead to deep healing and self-awareness. Welcome, Holli. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I have to show you something. And for those people who are listening to this on audio, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to come and watch lives from now on. I found this.
Oh God, that's the worst one.
Oh my gosh,
That's
isn't that awesome? I love it. It says
I
to
think that's the
Tiffany.
one when I think it's the one where I had the banana clip. It's
Oh,
terrible.
it's definitely a banana clip.
It's banana clip. It's terrible.
To Tiffany
I've had
from
short
your
hair.
friend always, Holli Dawson, but you're Holli Hoffarth now. So. I just died. Well, there was more than just you. It was all my Shaunaman people, okay? Look at them all.
So funny. Oh my
So,
gosh.
anyway, thank you for being on the podcast today. I'm really excited to dive into everything that you do. And now you're working with me on it. Because, yeah, I'm starting to learn more about my body
Mhm.
and the things that are going on in my body. And when I first came to you about a month ago, I was blown away by some of the things that you were talking to me about. And so I'd like to get into some of those. And it'll mainly revolve around the somatic part. But before we get into that, I'd love to know how you even got into this field, into yoga. What made you want to go in that direction?
Oh, that's a 20-year story. Um, okay, well, I don't know. I started practicing yoga 25 years ago. Just, pregnant with a child, just wanted to do some movement in my body. I don't know, something was curious about it. And then as the years went on, I became very driven with Ashtanga yoga, which is a very power-based yoga. And it was a very large coping mechanism for my own mental health. And jump forward, many years. 13 years ago, I had a hysterectomy. And after that hysterectomy, I did not do very well. I did not cope. My coping strategies that I had always known were not existent to me anymore. Physically, my body couldn't do them anymore. So again, very long story, but to put it into, the fastest way, I hit a very large depression for about 2 years. I had hormonal issues, obviously, after a hysterectomy. Mental health was really, really struggling. And my husband built me a yoga studio in our house and just said, if you can't find yourself out there, you got to find yourself in here. We need you. And so I just started kind of going into that room and trying to find ways to connect back to that yoga, to connect back to those poses. I jumped into a public class and I couldn't physically practice, but I knew I could lay in the back and like visualize myself doing the movements because I had done them for so many years. So I laid there, my breath work worked through. I connected with a visualization that my body was physically doing the practices, even though I wasn't. And I realized in that moment, there's something more to this. These memories are in my body. I don't actually have to physically create these shapes to get that feeling inside of myself. There's something here. So then I went and started taking trauma informed yoga. And then I took accessibility yoga, which brought an awareness to anybody in any way can create this type of connection. You don't have to make the shapes. You don't have to be a part of that physically. As long as our breath work was in connection, we could actually tap into different parts of our body. And so through those trainings, I just kind of kept building off of that and realizing that there was so many people out there that physically couldn't do yoga, that there was so much more around this mental health side of the connection to the breath. And so curiosity kept getting to me, and I ended up meeting a somatic psychologist about 6 years ago. And while in her sessions, I started to realize that her and I were doing something very, very similar.
Mhm.
Obviously, she has way more education, but there was something about it that was similar. And I started just kind of tweaking my teaching a little bit more, being more curious with my clients, just offering them more connection to the awareness in their body, like the way that
Mhm.
they were listening to their body. So then a year and a half ago, I finally jumped off and felt like I had a little more time in my life with my kids getting older. I've gone back to school for a somatic yoga therapist with Mandorla Institute.
Mhm.
And it's been there that I've learned the science behind what is happening. Yeah, so that's kind of 20 years in the making
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. And it seems to be what I've come to realize is that it can be a moment in our lives or a time in our lives that guide us to something
Mhm.
else that is what we're supposed to really be doing with our lives to help other people. Is that your experience?
Definitely. It was interesting after my hysterectomy, I started to kind of talk to different women at my children's schools and things like that when I was visiting with them, sharing my experience because I've always been someone that is hard on the sleeve and, very vocal about mental health because I believe in if we don't talk about it, how will we get through it?
Mhm.
So I was sharing my experience at the time with some women around the school, and before I knew it, my studio became very, very full of individual women in there with whether it be like grief from a loved one, cancer, MS. There was divorced, people in there. It was all kinds of situations, just stress of life, really. And now
Mhm.
those were the people that I was attracting for clients at the time. And it soon realized that there was a very large calling for this type of a
Mhm.
class.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So I know years and years and years ago, I saw some of your pictures. Like you were the power yoga woman on the paddle board, like on your head, like that was you, right?
Yeah.
And you went from that and experiencing a hysterectomy to really tapping into the inside part of the body and the fascia and all of the stuff that's in us and not necessarily the external part of yoga, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Those pictures actually were taken the week before my hysterectomy.
really? Oh,
Yeah, they're
wow.
very, yeah, those pictures are emotional for me because it was literally 1 week before my hysterectomy that those pictures were taken of me on that paddleboard. And this summer, 13 years later, was the first time I attempted it again, and I still couldn't get it, but it was coming back.
Yeah.
And because I could have that deep connection with myself and be curious about it, but it's an interesting ride because you as a young person, you think that your body's going to be here for you always.
Mhm.
And there's going to be changes eventually inside of it. And my one job in life right now is to look after my little human. And that's kind
Mhm.
of what I realize now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Your little Holly and my little
Yeah.
Tiff. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, in
Yeah.
your experience, what role does self awareness play in this healing process that we're on, and how do you continually cultivate it?
Well, for me personally, self awareness is self listening. That's what it comes down for me. My whole philosophy is to learn the body language and to listen to it. And that is what somatic to me is. It's this relationship that you learn to have with yourself where you listen when you have something going on, when you feel just something off. It's yeah, it's listening. It's this becoming of I can feel this like heart racing through my body right now. I can feel sweating right now. I can feel I'm speaking quickly or I'm stuttering. There's these body language cues that every one of us have. They may be different to each of us, but they are there and they're very existent. And it's being able to listen to them, but even taking it one step further, acknowledging them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. You have worked with many, many people in their healing journey. And what do
Mm.
you think is the biggest challenge that people face when they're trying their hardest to connect with their mind, body, and spirit? What do you think is holding them back from feeling like they can't?
People pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
people pleasing. So it's either people pleasing because of they can't take the time for themselves. They're pleasing their families. They've got other people prioritizing over them, which is a mom thing or a parent thing. But people pleasing in the sense of like I'll even see it in a group class where it's like someone won't allow themselves to actually express themselves, to actually cry, to actually like move their body, to really be inside of themselves because they're so worried about what is going to be thought about them. That's a huge part. For you to be able to come to me as knowing me for so many years, to be brave enough to come to me and say to me, I'm struggling with this, this, and this, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. And I know that's really hard. And that's my biggest respect to the clients that I have is the courage that they have when they get to come into the space. It takes a lot for you to make the phone call to come.
Well, let's talk about those. They weren't phone calls, but they were text messages for
Yeah.
a few years, right? Where I was like,
Yeah.
Holly, okay, I want to try yoga, but it's a lot, right? Like I texted you a few times and I was like, okay, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I never ever did it. And then something was just bugging me that I'm supposed to be going to see Holly. I'm supposed to be working through some of this stuff, and I knew it was time. There was something that was like, "Hey, you need to go." And I got to tell you that first session, you make people feel very, very seen. You make people
Mm.
feel comfortable. You make people feel safe. And you are so, so good at what you do that it allows people like me to really not just open up and share what's going on in my life, but to feel safe to let my body relax and let
Mhm.
the things happen that need to happen to get some relief and get the I'm not going to cry, but you know what I mean. In our session it was very powerful, that
Mhm.
feeling of safety and love. So
Yeah.
I just got to tell you, you are amazing at what you do, and I'm proud of you for doing this work. I was going to ask you, can you share a particular experience or story where somatic yoga and therapy made a significant difference in someone's life besides mine, now that you know that it's making a difference in mine?
Thanks, Tiffany. That honestly, that your words really are important to me, and it really feels good to hear those because you do question yourself. You're always going through your life wondering, what am I going to be when I grow up?
Yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
because I've had three kids and I've been a mom since I was 19, it's something that I never really got to think about what I wanted to do. And so when this has kind of evolved the way it has, it really is impactful and meaningful to hear that from you. So I want to just say thank you for that. How has this impacted what I've seen? Well, I can speak for myself, even from that point of
Mm-hmm.
view, is that if I was to say to you, the journey that I have been on, just even if I give you the last year, while I've been in this schooling and really intensive training with this, a year ago, I was very closed off. I was in a state of not trusting.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a real big trust thing for me in life with others. I just felt like it was hard for me to open up to people, especially because I live in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And because I do work in the community the way that I do, it's hard for me to let my guard down sometimes. And so that was really, really interesting for me. I've never felt like I belonged, even as a stance from a child. I've never felt like I've had really, really close friends. I've never felt like I fit in. And last year, when I first started this training, I sat in that the whole year. I sat in that going, I don't fit in, still not okay for this. I'm still not good enough for this. I still don't understand what I'm doing here, but this is making sense science, like in the science aspect of it for me. I need to keep going with it because I do believe in what I'm learning truly, but the social part of it and the peer part of it, I felt like I wasn't good enough and I felt like I didn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And then in June, I was in person training and I had a very, very visceral somatic experience myself. And without going into too much of it, just saying like, just having that visceral experience and having that release come from my body, not knowing at the time what that release was.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very much visceral in my body. It was in my breath work. It was in my emotions. It was very huge. It went on for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
And since that release, I have felt so light. I have
Mm-hmm.
never been one to be able to like dance and express myself and be
Yeah.
funny and be theatrical type of feeling with people. I've been very serious my whole life. I take responsibility very strongly.
Yeah.
And since that experience in June, I have felt lighter. I felt like I've been dancing all summer. I feel like I've been singing all summer and very like theatrical in my body. And
Yeah.
I have felt like I belonged for the
Oh.
first time. And that has been a huge thing for me coming from that day is that I all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, not only belong to the people around me, but I belong inside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I belong here. And I feel that so deeply. I see her for the first time. And I feel her for the first time in my life. And autonomy is probably been the biggest freedom and liberation that I have experienced through somatic work this year. And autonomy is not something that I have felt because I have been a mom since I was 19. And so to finally feel what that autonomy feels like inside of my body is very liberating.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, through this self work, I would say it really kicked in March. And now I'm still going. I mean, obviously, you still go through all these things yourself, but it's a very liberating feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't even have to be this talk and explain it. Doesn't have to be words to it. There was never words to it. It was a visceral inside of my body release. And yeah, it's hard to explain it.
It's hard to explain it, but again, in my first appointment, you did an incredible job of explaining the scientific side of it too, of like what we hold in our bodies,
Mhm.
and like really we're wanting to really lengthen. Can you explain how to me, explain to everybody how you explained it to me, lengthening out your nervous
Yeah.
system?
So I love visuals, and I feel like my clients do too. So I
Hmm.
kind of explain it like this. If I was an electrician and I was to come to work and my wires were all in a ball and they were all ratted up in knots and stuff like that, and then I was to try to hook them into our computer systems and have good communication, the likelihood of me having a short in the communication or short in the circuit would be really high. But if I was to take the time to create new shapes and lengthen out my wires and then plug them in, I would have a higher possibility of good communication.
Hmm.
So I visualize that as our nervous system inside the fascia lines. If I can create shapes inside of your body, or you can, I can help you create shapes inside of your body, we can then lengthen your wiring out so that your communication throughout your body is got a higher probability of good communication.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I explain it there. But I also explain it in a sense of sensation. So body language is really key for me, and it's part of the reason why that's what part of my company name is, because it's learning about the body language. So I explained it to you, Tiff, in the way of if I was to write a story or you were to be writing a story. So if we have a story of Tiffany on a page like this, Tiffany's story started with a sensation, so a word at the top of the page. And that word at the top of the page was her first sensation. Okay. That sensation starts to create feelings around it. So those feelings are sentences.
Hmm.
And then once we become starting to have feelings and sentences, we start to become having large amounts of sentences because we start to have large emotions, which are creating more sentences inside of our story. And by the time that you get down to the end of the first page of all of these feelings and these emotions and these sentences, you now have thoughts around those sentences, those feelings,
Hmm.
which then create core beliefs in the body. So if I was to give an example of that, if I'm having anxiety and my first sensation of anxiety is maybe like, shaking of the body, or even let's just say sweating. So sweating would be the first word of my sentence, my story. And if I was to start to learn to go, I need to interact when, as soon as I start to have the story, need to start to create shapes. I need to start creating breath connection. I need to start to interact with that first word of my story. My core belief will never be able to be interacted with. So it's knowing that we kind of backtrack a little bit, learn the body language of the body, knowing that those first few words of our story is where we learn to interact. We'll never get down to the core belief. Because if I keep going with the anxiety and I let the sweating happen and I let the shaking happen and the heart palpitations and I start getting out of my body and all these sentences start going, then all of a sudden now I'm feeling like, oh my God, I have anxiety. And
Hmm.
then it turns from that to saying, well, I have anxiety now, I can't go to work, and now my family's not going to like me, and they're not going to want me around because I always have anxiety. And the story becomes very, very extensive. And now, before I know it, I'm in a core belief. And so, what happens in the nervous system is sweating. The next time that sweating comes into my story, boom, my core belief is I'm never going to get out of this, and my family's going to hate me.
Hmm.
So, they just go together like that.
Hmm.
So, in order for us to stop that pattern, that samskara of the body, we need to interact with the first word, the first sensation, the sweating. Does that
So
make
how
sense?
do you deal with that one, for example?
Well, you acknowledge it,
Hmm.
and we have tools and things like that. And that's where I can teach you like tools to interact with it. Maybe there is, a shape that you need to take. Maybe there's a breath tool that you can use. I do personally, I do a lot of tapping.
Hmm.
I do a lot of, tapping and massaging certain areas of the body and, closing the mind off. And I start taking in some big breaths.
Hmm.
And I start to acknowledge, I can see you. I can see that you're sweating. I can see that this is starting for you. I believe that this isn't the case. You start to connect with yourself in these ways and in these conversations, and you
Hmm.
create that breath pattern. And it's just very slowing things down as much as you can, starting to feel yourself come back into the body. Sit the sit bones down onto the chair, put the feet to the floor, start to drop the shoulders down, start to connect where you bring yourself back into your body. Because the
Hmm.
stories take you out of your body. They take you to places of possibility of dissociating, derealization, all of these things when we leave our bodies. So it's important to stay in the body. And the more and the faster that you can bring yourself back to your body, the faster that the core belief doesn't get to be attached to. So
Mhm.
it's a lot about, connecting with self. Maybe it's jumping up and down. Maybe it's going for a walk. Like it's just awareness that that sweating happened and that,
Mhm.
okay, now I'm going to interact with that so it doesn't get out of control and I stay in my body. I always say to my clients, check in so you stop checking out.
I love that. And
Hmm.
that's where there's been a few exercises you've given me, but one two of them for sure are like when I'm going for my walk, pay attention, check in with even the movement of my feet. Pay attention to how my clothes fit on my body, how the water is feeling in the shower on my body, right? Really pay attention to those things that are going on and keep doing it until you are more in touch with your body, I guess. Is that how
Yeah.
that works?
Well, I start off with that because I want to keep it simple and I want to keep it so it doesn't become like a feeling of overwhelming to
Mhm.
add this into your life. Is that somatic therapy isn't like something like you need to clear the room, have a big space on the floor, have all the tools to be able to start being somatic in your life. It's not
Mhm.
about that. It's about being somatic in your day-to-day life and all throughout the day. And so I will say to my clients, such as yourself, is that, okay, let's just start with, dressing for your nervous system. Does that bra or does that those pants feel too tight? Are they restricting you? Are you going to feel grouchy all day because you have yourself trapped inside of these clothes that you don't like? Go
Mhm.
change your clothes.
Mhm.
So that right there is just a building of awareness. My body feels gross inside of these clothes. Okay, I'm listening. I'm going to go change.
Mhm.
And then go about your day in something better. I'll also say something like just brush your teeth. Did you brush your teeth this morning, Tiffany? I'm sure you did, but do you remember doing it?
Well, I've been getting much better at paying
Good,
attention to the teeth
good.
brushing. There it's I'm not perfect at it, but there are many times where I'm like, listen. Listen to what Holly said and pay attention and
Yeah,
actually feel the toothbrush going on the teeth and like cleaning them and it's amazing how more aware of everything in my body I have become since starting this work. I want
yeah.
to talk a little bit about the fascia. And when you were explaining it to me, it made perfect sense and I could visualize it. And then I saw this Instagram reel that I sent to you. And I'm going to show it for the people that are on the live. And it says, when emotional trauma has been too much, it gets trapped in our fascia. Trauma is contraction and pain, healing is flow. Can
Mhm.
you explain that a little bit?
Well, the way that I understand it and the way that I work with it is that the nervous system sits within the fascia system. And so our fascia is from our head to our toes, and we can manipulate it. We can create shape and expansion through movement and shapes. So if the fascia line is constricted inside of, let's say, the chest or the diaphragm, and we're squeezing over and stuff like that, and that's kind of the way that our body is sitting, our wiring becomes very knotted and very like constricted, so then the communication can't flow properly. So in my life, the fascia would be something that I would interact with, that I would open up, so now I have this possibility of this communication going through. Our
Mhm.
body has more lines to the sympathetic system than it does having to the parasympathetic system. And the sympathetic is a fight and flight in some circumstances, but it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. We're super complex. When it comes to the polyvagal theory and the body, we always believe that we should be in this very, vagal state, this very calm state, that we should be just chilling out and meditating and, and all this stuff. That's actually not entirely great either. You can't get stuff done in the world if you're sitting there in a very, parasympathetic vagal state. You
Mm-hmm.
need to have sympathetic states to get you across the street, to get you to drive the car, to get you to get stuff done in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's when we sit inside of these states for too long, or when we become so, dependent on these states, that we don't learn to pendulate through these other states. So to pendulate from a state of like vagal into sympathetic to into dorsal, and then to be able to flow back into these other states. It's those that's where the health of the body is when you're able to move through and kind of, like I say, a metronome through these states. You rock back and out of these states as your day goes. It's when we sit dormant inside of one of those states, that's when things become unhealthy. And so when it comes to the fascia lines and the nervous system, that's what happens, is that when one of our systems become very, very locked up, it becomes very closed in. We get tension in the body in those fascia lines. That becomes chronic pain, it becomes disease. That's where we start to see like these weird shoulder issues, or like this weird thing in my back all the time, and people are talking about these tensions in their physical body. Well, is it trauma sitting inside of the fascia lines? Is it trauma sitting inside of the body? And we need to then create shapes to then expand the body out, to then release that trauma out of the body. It's we're complex. We're very complex. But when the mind can't handle something, the body takes it on. It's the
Mm-hmm.
rule.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't care who you are, there's something in the body. And whether it's big or small, we need to talk to it. We need to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. One of those ways that you helped me talk to my body was the first time that I tried Tremors.
Hmm.
Do you want to talk about those? Those are cool. I loved it. I wasn't expecting what it was or what it would do, but trust me, I've been doing them and I find them, and I've shown my mom, and I just find them really interesting. Even some of the emotions that come out of you when you are in the middle of one. Do you want to explain what tremors are?
Oh boy. Neurogenic tremors. Well, again, coming back into the fascia lines and coming back into the body, we hold these stress, tension, trauma in our body. And when we experience a neurogenic tremor, what we're doing is we're facilitating the release of a deeper held tension or stress in the body. It can also like bring up the buried emotional traumas in the body as well. And so in a safe space, and I say that loosely because we don't always have safe spaces, and sometimes the body never feels safe. So in a place that you feel ready to and to explore and be curious with a tremor, it would be a time where you are looking to maybe you're wanting to reduce the trauma related symptoms, is basically what you're doing. You're trying to lessen the symptoms of the trauma in the body. Um, it's so hard to explain, Tiff, on without
Well, you can use
experiencing.
me as an example. I was
Right.
laying on my back and
Mhm.
with my knees open, pretty much, right?
Yeah, it can be done in many different ways. It can be done in the arms. Like I'll have people do it with just even their arms up. And basically you're bringing yourself into a state, like I'll just show for my arms. So if I
Mm-hmm.
bring myself into a state where I've got my arms out in front of me and I can wait. So let me see where my camera is here. So I can wait, and I can wait to see, is there going to be a tremor? You can start to see one in my right hand right
Mm-hmm.
out the gate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's trauma inside of my shoulder, and I know that, my neck, right? So I get these tremors that I can get going inside of my body. And if I allow this to sit going and let the tremor work its way through, and I continue to create breath, a relationship with breath around that, and let the rest of my body settle into a place of rest. So for you, your knees were rested on a bolster, your body was propped up, it had blankets around it, it was very, very supported, so
Mm-hmm.
that the rest of the body understood that it was breathing, it was inside of a very, very, relaxed, supported way, but yet there was a tremor happening coming from the inside of your leg.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the side, and well, inside and side of your leg. And so your body was supporting you by holding that space available for you to explore with breath work, to allow that tremor to unravel and work its way out. It was like you were the electrician and you were
Mm-hmm.
taking your lines, making them longer through the tremor.
Mm-hmm.
Your body was unraveling those little tiny knots in order for that line in your body to become lengthened, to have better communication, and possibly reduce the intensity of the trauma symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm. And you can go as little or as long as
Mhm.
you want to. And at first I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this. And then
Yeah.
I kept going, and I knew when it was time that I was ready to stop. It was
Mm.
interesting how my body, it I knew I was safe with you. And so,
Mhm.
and I was comfortable and I was supported. And so I just let it happen. And yeah, like you can actually just feel that unraveling happening as it as it's doing it. And so I highly recommend, yeah, just looking into it even, and doing the one with your arm like Holli was just showing, and just see where your body is needing that
Mhm.
unraveling to happen. So what would you recommend to somebody that is never heard of somatic therapy or practices? What would you suggest people do if they want to start exploring this? And yeah, let's go from there.
What do they want to do? Well, um, that's a big question. Like, are you thinking like how, like, do they find somebody, or are they just being, you just want me to give some tools to be curious
Yeah,
about?
tools to be curious. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I always say, like I said to you earlier, dress your nervous system. Today, when you go to get dressed, actually ask yourself, does my body feel good inside of this? Do I feel like I'm going to have the best version of myself today inside of this? Or do I need to go and change my clothes? I changed 3 times before I got dressed today, not because of the visual of it, but because of the way that it felt on my body.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one way. The other way would be to slow things down by brushing your teeth, slow things down by going in the shower, feeling your body and the water just kind of touch each other. I also believe in, deep breath work. I know people think that that's, such a trivial thing, but to me personally, that's where I have deep connection. When my breath takes on a certain characteristic or certain personality, I know where I am and where I'm going. So, for an
Mm-hmm.
example, if I am breathing really quickly, I probably know that I'm going to start crying,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not breathing and I'm holding space, then I'm probably going to get upset or I'm going to be angry or something. If I'm breathing pretty well, good pattern, I know that I'm regulated. So, just noticing, what's your breath saying? What's the dialogue inside the breath today? What type of personality does the breath have today? Because it really does speak upon what is going on in your nervous system. So I would say just start to notice what the language of your breath is saying for you in the moment.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and
Do you think that people hold their breath a lot?
oh, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found
They'll
that
get,
since I've started working on my breath and
yeah.
helping other people work on their breath, is so many are holding it in all the time.
Yeah. Like I hear daily, oh my gosh, I think that's the first breath I took today,
Mm-hmm.
like daily. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, I do it. I know I do it. It's all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, like I haven't, I haven't exhaled yet. I'm going to
Yeah.
exhale now.
Mm-hmm.
I started making the craziest sounds in my car while I drive because I didn't realize how much I was like in my mind and not in my body while I was driving, that autopilot
Oh, yeah.
feeling, or
Where you
yeah,
don't
how
know
did I
how you
even get?
got from one place to
Yeah,
another. Yeah,
yeah.
I should work on that one with my breath.
Yes. And so I started making sounds with my breath to be able to activate that parasympathetic button because I knew that I was too far into sympathetic. I was just getting there. I was just getting myself pushed through, and I was when not paying attention. I was not in my body, right? So
Hmm.
it's just about noticing how far out. Dissociation is a very interesting little thing because dissociation, such as autopilot while we're driving, it is people think dissociation is something very extreme that happens in the body or in the mind, but it's actually very, very subtle. I could have dissociated 5 different times during this podcast.
Hmm.
It's something very, very subtle that
Hmm.
our mind does for ourselves. It's a protection of ourselves. So you're just noticing when you're checking out, come back in, check in, drop yourself down, sit bones down, shoulders down. You just kind of keep noticing that. Yeah, it's just the small things, I think,
Hmm.
personally. When the
Yeah.
body has a yes and the body has a no, notice it.
Mhm. Well, that was one thing in our sessions that was really interesting for me too, is just acknowledging those yeses and nos that my body was
Mhm.
saying and honoring them.
Yeah,
Hmm.
honoring them. That's the big part. And it comes back to that people pleasing or that lack of autonomy for yourself is just notice them. But not only notice them, then now go ahead and actually step towards them and let yourself be felt and heard there. Like, this doesn't feel good. I am cold. I do
Hmm.
need a blanket. We're so quick to ignore ourselves in order to put someone else in front of us. And that's where we have to kind of stop doing that,
And
especially as women.
oh, as absolutely, as I've noticed in the last, I don't know, maybe few months when I am involved in an activity like working out or in practices with you or whatever, and I know now when I need to say something. And before I just would have pushed myself and said, I'm not going to look like a wimp or that I can't do this. And now I'm honoring that. And you were one of the ones to teach me how to honor what my body is saying. So super grateful for that. I could talk to you for ever and ever and ever and ever. And I will talk to you later tonight at our session. But I end every episode with asking my guests what they are grateful for today. What are you grateful for today, Holly?
Mm. I'm grateful for the colors that I get to see
Mm,
today. I am grateful for the health of my body, not just physically, but the way that my mind and body have good conversations now.
mhm.
So I'm very grateful for that. But today I'm going to take in all the colors I can possibly see outside.
I know, isn't it gorgeous? We live in a
Yeah,
very, very beautiful area. We
yeah,
live about 10 minutes away from each other. And yeah, the colors are just phenomenal. So,
yeah.
and I am grateful for you. I'm grateful that I get to see you tonight. And I'm just grateful that I listened to that nudge to finally get in touch with you and actually start working on this. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being on the show today. And yeah, I will see you later tonight.
Thanks, Tiff, for having me, and we'll see you tonight.
Thanks for being here for this episode of Hard Beautiful Journey. I hope today's episode inspired you to embrace your own vulnerabilities and recognize the strength within you. Remember, every story of resilience adds to the beauty of our shared journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your support helps me spread hope and healing to even more listeners. Until next time, keep shining your light and embracing the beauty in your journey. Bye-bye.